Anyways, guys, welcome to another episode of Lunch with Mark and Jen. Because I feel like at the time we're recording it today, it's almost lunchtime. Just because we are just getting back from vacation, so we have
Listen,
like 5 million things to do.
it's shade.
No,
Yeah,
no.
because you blaming me.
I'm not even blaming him. I'm just saying in general, we're just. But it doesn't matter because welcome to another episode of Breakfast with Mark and Jen.
But you want it to be recorded properly, right?
Okay. And so we are here to help your Christian marriage thrive.
Let's go.
So last time you guys saw us, we had given you a recording from the beautiful Montego Bay, Jamaica, but this time we're back. We're back home, back on the grind.
Yeah.
But we're continuing with our series centered around couples in the Bible.
Right.
And so today we're not talking about Jacob and Rachel. We're talking about Jacob and Leah. You know how like on some people's social media, their relationship status says it's complicated? That's what their relationship status would say. I don't even know why social media gives you an opportunity to put that on as a drop down, meaning it may be complicated, but why do you want people to know? I don't know. Maybe I'm just too
I
private for
didn't even
that.
know that was a
No, I
category.
on Facebook, at least in years past, I've seen where people
Really?
will change their status from like married to it's complicated
Wow.
or single to it's complicated, like or engaged to it's complicated. And I guess I'm just like, but Facebook, why do you offer people an opportunity to
That's not a real
tell their
category.
business? It was at least in years past because I've seen it with my own eyes.
You're either engaged or not engaged.
You're married or you're not married, you're dating or you're not dating, but people used to love clicking that. Y'all used to love clicking that drop down too.
That like,
Because I saw some of y'all use it. Like it would
listen,
go from married to it's complicated. And I used to be like, ooh, don't tell Facebook that.
you married. You may be going through stuff, but you're married. And to be honest, when is marriage not complicated? When is marriage not work?
What? Oh yes, it is it does always take work.
Yeah.
But I will say that there are times, I mean, don't make the single folks who are catching this get scared, Mark. It's not like marriage every single day of your life is just one big complicated glob of like those rubber band balls. That's like, those things are balls of confusion. I don't even know how you get started on making one of those.
I mean, but
You know
this
what I'm talking
level,
about? Those
yeah,
rubber band balls?
yeah.
I haven't even seen those in a while. Can y'all get those at Staples?
But what
Let me
made you
know.
think of rubber band
Because that's
balls?
complicated. Those are,
Yeah,
I
but
don't
there's
even know.
levels of complication.
I don't even know how you start those rubber band balls.
You got rubber band balls. You
If
got
they
a
still,
Rubik's cube,
yes, those are complicated. But
calculus.
oh, listen, I failed that the first time. I'm not
You
even
didn't
gonna
even
lie.
take it.
Yes, I did. Remember, you had to tutor me in it when we were dating.
I thought that was algebra.
No, I'm not that I'm not that behind in math. Algebra
I didn't know you had to do calculus.
in college, guys, I actually failed calculus the first time. I'm just not even gonna sit up here and pretend like I aced it. I literally failed the class, and then Mark tutored me online, and this was before like Zoom and all that stuff. So it was literally like just voice tutoring. He wasn't even able to like, but he would like write out the problem, right? And then I would say like, here's the next problem, and he would like write it out and then walk me through it. But at the end of the day, what I want to say before we start this is if you guys know if Staples or Office Depot still sells those rubber band balls, drop it in the comments. I actually feel like I could use one
What? You want to
for
use?
my like office space in the house.
Just to look at though, because you ain't about to try and.
I'm not rubber banding anything,
Okay.
but
That's the intro to
that's the
Jacob
intro
and Leah.
because they were that complicated. Rubik's
Yeah.
Cube complicated, rubber band complicated. Um, so for those, Mark, who may come across this that don't know the story of Jacob and Leah, I just want to quickly say that Jacob was a man who had gone to his relative's home. His relative's name was Laban. Laban had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. When Jacob saw Rachel, he's like, that's her. That's my wife. That's who I'm supposed to come down here and get. and he asked Laban, if I work for you for 7 years, basically, can I have Rachel's hand in marriage?
Right.
Laban says yes. And because back then, when women were getting married, especially in that culture, they didn't have like these see-through veils that we see in Western culture. Like you were
No.
completely veiled.
Yeah.
And so Jacob, on his wedding day, didn't realize that he had actually married Leah until his wedding night. He's upset as any man would be, and he's asking Laban, why did you trick me? And Laban says, well, it's because in our culture, the younger daughter cannot get married before the older.
Right.
So I gave you Leah, but if you want Rachel that much, work it for me for another 7 years.
Right.
And it's a total just trickery on Laban's part. And why didn't Laban just say that up front so that Jacob could decide, well, what do I want to do? Because I don't really want to marry Leah.
Because Laban was playing games. He was playing games, and he knew that Rachel was the younger daughter. He knew that Leah had to get married first,
Yep.
and he never told Jacob none of that. Now, what is most interesting about what you said is that how the women were veiled to the point that you couldn't see who was behind the veil,
Correct.
and they must have been veiled in the bedroom too, because the marriage was consummated,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until the morning after. Y'all know about the morning after.
What? Where is he going with this?
Listen, if you've ever lived a life before Christ,
Oh.
then you know about the morning
So
after.
basically, if you're not on your John the Baptist vibe.
Listen,
But
but hold on.
because I'm like,
The morning after.
guys, this is
Sometimes
getting nerve-wracking.
sometimes you'll go down a road,
Okay.
you'll end up with somebody, and then you look at them the morning after, and you're like, what was I thinking?
Well, thankfully, I've not had that experience.
Yeah, I haven't had it either. However, I
'Cause
had
for
some
me, the
friends
morning
that had
after-
that experience. When I was in college, I had some friends that were like, yo, I woke up the next day and was like, what was I thinking? I was like, well, you should have been, smarter the night before.
Yeah, I mean, that's why God in his wisdom reserved sex for marriage. Because my morning after was the day after my wedding, and I didn't have to be like, oh no, what have I just done?
Right, because it was...
This is a pure podcast. Don't even continue.
Okay, so, but that's interesting because in that culture, she was veiled even during their wedding night. And it wasn't until they consummated the marriage
Right.
that he looked and said, man, this is not Rachel.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because it shows you the level to which they had culture embedded into something like marriage, because today sometimes we feel like marriage doesn't have a culture to it. It does.
Oh, yeah.
Marriage in the West is different than marriage in the East.
Absolutely.
And how we approach marriage and how we think about marriage is definitely shaped by culture.
Yeah, and even there's subcultures right within our own country and in other countries. So here in the
Yup.
US, there's certain things that Black couples do that
Yup.
maybe a white couple won't
Gonna
do.
jump that broom.
Jump the broom.
Yup.
Kind of remembering when that's how slaves kind of signified
Yeah.
that they were married back in the day. Also, you have American Jews who, when they put their foot on that glass before they say Mazel Tov, and so it's just a reminder that even within America and other countries, you have subcultures. So it's just to reiterate your point that marriage absolutely has a culture. But think about how complicated Jacob and Leah's marriage starts off, because the marriage starts off by you basically hearing from your husband, I do not want you. And had I known that it was you behind that veil, I wouldn't have even gone down this road.
Can you imagine that?
So that's already setting you up for a relationship that's going to be all types of complicated.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's no one's fault but Laban's.
Right.
It's not Leah's fault.
Yeah.
It's not Jacob's fault.
And then it begs the question, Jen, can you learn to love someone?
Mm-hmm.
Can you can you fall in love after the fact?
Hmm.
Can you end up in a situation where you're like, "Hey, I'm stuck,
Yeah.
but let's make the best of this
Mm-hmm.
and let's learn to love each other and grow together." I think the interesting thing about Jacob and Leah is that Jacob was unwilling
That's good, Mark.
to learn to love Leah.
I never thought of it that way.
Because if you read the story, she did everything she could.
And we always get on Leah like, oh, you're, you know, nagging and you're
Yeah.
trying to get the attention of a guy. Like, leave him alone. But really, everybody wants to be loved. And I guess, what is she really doing wrong? She's not chasing somebody else's husband. She's chasing her own husband.
Yeah. And I get the fact that you love who you love.
Right.
However, they are in a marriage. Divorce is something that is against their culture, against their religion, against their faith.
Mm-hmm.
They're stuck. I think Jacob could have done a better job of learning to love her, because even in that culture, it's not like he couldn't take another wife.
Right. Which is why he was able to get Rachel.
Right. So why couldn't he do a better job of loving Leah and saying, "Hey, I really am in love with Rachel. That's where my heart is, but I appreciate you." Like, he did a good job of stepping on top of Leah and crushing her
Yeah. Because
self-esteem
that's the thing,
and making
Mark.
her feel
I
unwanted.
feel like he's lacking in love, but even respect. Like when
Yeah.
you look at that story, you see where he has even allowed her to lose her self-respect, because
Yeah.
there's one point in the story where she pays Rachel basically to have a night with Jacob, because it was supposed to be Rachel's night.
Yeah.
And she literally pays Rachel, like, just she has just lost her self-respect. I've heard, though, Mark, in cultures where arranged marriages are common, meaning even in our modern society.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen interviews and documentaries on couples who are coming from Eastern culture who say that they had arranged marriages, and they've been actually not only married for maybe 30 or 40 years, but some of the couples reported being happily married for 30 or 40
Yeah.
years. And I think what you brought up is key, is that there must have been a mutual agreement on both sides that we're going to learn to love each other. We're going to
Yeah.
learn to pick out the things about you that are admirable. We're going to learn to
Mm-hmm.
pick. So even if maybe something about your spouse that your parents picked for you wasn't your first choice
Mm-hmm.
physically, maybe they weren't tall enough or
Yeah.
short enough, but you're going to say, okay, but what can I love about you? I can love that you are a hard worker. I
Yeah.
can love that you take faith seriously. I can love. And so it's interesting to me that while you and I don't have an experience with arranged marriage, nor do we really see it much in our own culture, we have heard from people in cultures where it's common, and they say that the marriage doesn't just last on paper, but some of them say they actually end up being happy.
Right. Because what makes a marriage work? It's love that is produced out of sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It's two people willing to say, "I will sacrifice my needs in order to meet your needs."
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take much for marriage to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the willingness of those two parties to say, "You know what? I'm in this situation. Let's put in the work. Let's sacrifice to make this thing thrive."
Right.
And that's why sometimes arranged marriages work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when arranged marriages don't work,
Yeah.
it's because, like, forget about abuse, forget about,
Right.
things like that. But if it just doesn't work out, it's because those two parties are unwilling to say, "I'm going to sacrifice my needs, my wants for you
Mm-hmm.
and love you and learn to sacrifice for you." Like, that's what makes arranged marriages actually come together and work. And I'm thinking about, Jen, how many couples weren't in an
Hmm.
arranged situation, but they don't realize they got to put in the work.
Yeah.
They're going to have to love that person in sickness and in health,
Mm-hmm.
for richer, for poorer. No matter how things work out, they're going to have to say, "You know what? I'm in this thing. Let me put the work in. You belong to me, and I'm going to love you to the
I
end."
think that's good, Mark. And we always focus on Leah also because the Bible actually tells us that she was cross-eyed.
Yeah.
And so we kind of have categorized her as this unattractive, nagging woman that no one wants to be bothered with. But there's nothing in the Bible that indicates that Jacob was Leah's type either.
Right.
She's trying to love him. She's
Hmm.
trying to be a good wife. She's trying to give him children. But there's nothing that indicates that Leah, as soon as she saw Jacob, was like, man, that's my type.
Yeah.
Maybe he wasn't.
Yeah.
But she was like, but you know what? I'm going to love you.
I'm gonna love you. Now, Jen, there's a flip side to it
Mm-hmm.
because look at what Leah is able to do for Jacob, but yet it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the fact that Leah is able to have son upon son upon son. She's able to have all these sons for
Mm-hmm.
Jacob. And in those days, having a son was a prized possession.
Yeah.
Imagine the context that Abraham is your grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Hmm.
know that your legacy, your seed is going to be blessed.
Yeah.
Now, you've heard about the stories, and you're Jacob, so you know if I have a son, this is going to continue the legacy. And you've heard the promises of God that, hey, out of you is going to come a great nation.
Mm-hmm.
Leah is performing,
Mm-hmm.
Leah is producing,
Yeah.
but yet he's still like, nah.
Yeah.
Imagine the amount of love that he had for Rachel, that even though Rachel could not give him sons,
Mm-hmm.
he looked past that and he loved her anyway. I think it shows the power of loving someone, but loving their flaws as well.
Yeah. And it shows you that love is absolutely a choice, because when you
I like that.
choose
Yeah,
to love somebody, it's amazing how you love them beyond what they can or cannot do.
yeah,
But when you've chosen not to love someone, then you are just going to pick out every flaw.
yeah,
Everything about them is going to annoy you and drive you up a wall. But I think what we can gain from this lesson is that you should never have to be in a position where you have to perform in order to earn love.
yeah.
We actually don't earn Christ's love through performance.
That's good.
Because if
That's
we
good.
did have to earn it that way, none of us would ever be eligible, because you can really never be eligible enough and perform high enough to meet the standard of such a holy God.
Yeah,
But he chooses to love us outside of what we can or cannot do.
yeah. That's so good. It's powerful that Jacob is like, I'm going to choose you
Mm-hmm.
in terms of as it relates to Rachel.
Right.
And I'm not going to choose you, Leah.
Yeah.
Now, if we go back to the mindset, the mentality, the emotions of Leah, what it must have felt like to try and perform and have to earn
Yeah.
Jacob's love.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, there's something there. Because right now, there's a couple watching us
Mm-hmm.
where one party feels like I have to work so hard
Mm.
just to get affirmation from my spouse, and no
Yeah.
matter what I do, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
No matter how hard I work,
Mm.
no matter how many bonus checks I bring in,
Yeah.
no matter how many degrees I get,
Mm-hmm.
it's like my spouse is always looking at somebody else. My spouse is always comparing me to someone else and saying, you're good, but you're not like them though.
Mm. Wow.
Like what, like you done well, but why don't you try and go for, like it's just never good enough. And I
Wow.
think that couples struggle with this, having to work for the affirmation, the applause, the approval of their spouse. Because deep down inside, when you love someone, you want them to be proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to want you.
Yeah.
And I can imagine how difficult it was for Leah to say, okay, I had Judah. Judah wasn't good enough. I had Simeon.
Mm-hmm.
Simeon wasn't good enough. And all these sons she's having, and she believes that the next son is going to produce the
Mm-hmm.
affirmation, the appreciation, and the love coming from Jacob. And it's not good enough. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that if you're in a situation, if you're in a relationship where nothing you do is ever good enough,
Mm-hmm.
then you need to go see someone and have counseling and have sessions, have communication
Yeah.
around what is the root cause
Oh, yes.
of the lack of appreciation.
I think that's perfect. And I was I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because I was saying, hey, we've kind of presented the problem to them, but we're always big on presenting the solution. So I
Yeah.
think that's perfect. That if you are in a marriage right now, like Mark said, where you've noticed that you're performing, and it's not good enough, then you do need to seek a third party
Yeah.
through faith-based counseling to figure out what's the root cause of that. Why is your spouse in a position where nothing you do is good enough?
Yeah.
And I think you also need to go to counseling to not only find out the root cause of why they're behaving that way, but to also find the root cause of why you're accepting it and what you can do
Right.
to finally say to them, I know my worth.
Yeah.
And I don't have to prove anything to you, even though you're my spouse.
Yeah.
So, getting to the root cause of why it's happening and getting to the root cause of why the other party is allowing it to happen. But I also want to say, whether you're in an arranged marriage or you and your spouse chose each other,
Mm-hmm.
the reality is either way you made a commitment. Because
Right.
one thing I learned from watching a documentary on arranged marriages is that they say in a lot of cultures where marriages are arranged, they do give you an opportunity to refuse.
Okay.
So in a arranged marriage, let's say among Indian couples, East Indian couples, I've even seen a documentary on like Hasidic Judaism. And even if the matchmaker or your parents feel like this would be a good match, you meet with the person. If there's something that says no,
Yeah.
you actually do get an opportunity to say, I don't think this person's right for me.
Right.
So except for in extreme instances where maybe you were forced,
Mm-hmm.
most times even in an arranged marriage you do get an opportunity to say no.
Yeah.
So either way you made a commitment, and so it is unfair to your spouse for you to make a commitment to
That's
honor them
good.
and love them
Yeah.
and then turn around and flip the script.
Yeah.
Because even Jacob was in a forced situation and he
Yeah.
still could have made the choice
Yeah.
to do better. But how much more if you were given the option to
Mm-hmm.
opt out, but
Yeah.
you opted in,
Yeah.
and then turn around and say,
Yeah.
nothing that you do is really good enough. You're not really what I wanted.
Yeah. And it's really difficult position to be in when you feel like you have to perform for your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And for guys, that's a big deal because a lot of our self-worth is performance based.
Mm.
Unfortunately, guys keep score.
Mm-hmm.
When we grow up, it's about who makes the most shots, it's about who scores the most touchdowns, who can bench press the most, who can
Mm-hmm.
run the fastest. We have these stats that we build up. So then we import that into a marriage. And what we need our wives to do is not make love performance based.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like if
Absolutely.
you're comparing me to your other partners that you had before we got married,
Mm.
then that makes my performance in the bedroom performance based, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes my appreciation based on how I perform and make you feel fulfilled. And if I don't measure up in any way, shape, or form, then that makes me feel insecure.
Right.
And I think that when women understand the psyche of a man and how fragile we are around performance,
That's good.
then you'll stop saying things that make us think that we have to perform.
Mm-hmm.
You'll stop saying things based on how good we did or we didn't accomplish that goal. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think that that will help our psyche and
Yeah.
make us feel a little bit more safe to be like, I don't have to perform for you. Like, Leah, you don't have to have another child
Mm.
to earn Jacob's love.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to bring in another bonus check. I don't have to buy you another bag, right? Another purse, another pair of shoes
Mm-hmm.
for you to love me.
Yeah.
And that's from a guy's perspective. What do you think from a female's perspective? Because I think women can be performance driven as well,
Mm-hmm.
but just a little bit differently. I'm not sure it's based on stats,
Mm-hmm.
but in a woman's context, right? Because you're in a male dominated world,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you feel like you have to perform
Mm.
in order to feel validated and worth something.
Mm-hmm.
whether it's physically performed, whether it's, I don't know. What do you think
I
about that?
think for some women, from the perspective of how they view their spouse, I think most women who are reasonable, the performance that they want to see from you is just feeling safe and feeling provided for. And
Right?
the reason why I say a reasonable woman is because I'm not talking about the women who know their husbands are working hard,
Right.
providing the best they can, and they're still demanding things that they know the man either can't afford or
Yeah.
can't accomplish. But I think from a performance base, I think that's more I think that's, if I can be honest, maybe
Yeah.
a little bit more modern, the
Okay.
pressure to perform.
Yeah.
Because I think with the introduction of social media, female CFOs and
Yeah.
CEOs, I think that pressure has been added more recently. I'm not so sure that my grandmother's generation felt that same need. I think my
I like that.
grandmother, my maternal grandmother, she was an excellent homemaker. I saw a little bit of it before she passed.
Yeah.
And I think she literally was content to be a homemaker. I've said in other videos, she graduated as valedictorian of her high school class. So she
Right.
was no dummy, but then she didn't feel the need to take that and become the first Black woman
Right. Right.
CEO in her generation. And there's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I am saying that I just sometimes wonder if the pressure that men feel to perform has been placed on women with the rise in like single parent homes, with the rise in women being allowed to join armed forces,
Yeah.
women being allowed to play certain sports. And again, I'm not saying that I'm here to discriminate against my own gender,
Yeah.
but I think it's more modern. And because of that, and because of the type of environment I grew up in, I
Yeah.
actually personally don't have that pressure.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it may sound superficial to some, but I really don't have that pressure. I think the only pressure I put on myself is the goals that I know I want to accomplish for myself.
I like
But
that.
I don't feel that same level of pressure that I think a guy might feel, or
Yeah.
that other like modern women may feel.
Yeah.
I think I can be old school when it comes to that specifically.
Yeah. Do you feel any pressure around being a mom?
Well,
Like, is
now,
that a different arena now that says, okay, forever women have been mothers, and now I'm not really competing in a man's world, I'm competing in a
I
woman's
think they're,
world, and
yes.
now I have to be this super mom.
Yeah, I think that might be a little bit more relatable for
Yeah.
a woman that's maybe built like me,
Yeah.
because your kids go to school and there's pressure for your kid to always have dope outfits. That's why I'm an advocate for uniforms. I wish my kids' school would implement that.
Right.
There's a pressure for your kids to be well behaved and well mannered in public.
Right.
They should be well mannered,
Yeah.
but what I mean is, no one wants to be the mom whose kid is like loud at the restaurant because
Right.
people look at you. And then, even in the small things, like at our children's school, which I'm not going to disclose here, but at our children's school, some of the moms lay it on heavy without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Like, you have moms who literally once a week are stopping by Chick-fil-A
Yeah.
and they're bringing the teacher a sweet tea. They're stopping by Starbucks and they're bringing the teacher a coffee. And I'm not someone, I don't think I am lacking in consideration for others, but it also doesn't cross my mind to bring you a coffee once a week
Yeah.
when I have more than one kid at the school. You have some moms where, like, I thought I was doing well, Mark, when our daughter, who's our oldest, was in kindergarten and I got every kid a candy cane for Christmas.
Right.
There was a mom who had gotten these cookies in the shape of wreaths. She got them gourmet. They were like custom cookies that said Merry Christmas on a wreath.
Listen.
Then attached to it was a little note that said Merry Christmas from, we're going to call him Jonah since that wasn't the kid's name. Merry Christmas to you from Jonah. May God bless you. See you in the new year.
Right.
And I honestly felt like my candy canes were inferior.
Listen, I don't even
Because
have.
I know the type of cookies that she got, those are not cheap cookies.
No. But that's what I mean is that, sometimes I think just as humans, we can be performance driven.
Yeah.
And while it may not be the same for everyone, we import those things
That's
into
true.
into our marriage.
Yeah.
So like how you perform as a mom affects how you feel validated as a wife.
That's true, and that's good.
Now, if you don't have kids, it may not be that way for you, but
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of times we have discussions and you're like, man, how you think I'm doing as a mom?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that weight in our marriage
Mm.
because being a mom is so important to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna drive your emotions in our marriage. Do
Mm-hmm.
you feel like, oh, I made them a good enough lunch? Like, do you think they appreciate the lunches and the dinners and do they
Yeah.
have this and that? And that affects the marriage. And that's why I'm like, have being a performance driven spouse
Yeah.
will actually deflate your marriage when
Yeah.
you know that you're valid, you are worth something,
Mm-hmm.
you are loved. Man, I think that's one of the greatest places to be in marriage.
Yeah, and
When you feel like you have to earn it, you end up like
I
Leah.
think you're healthy as a person, which means you're healthy as the other party in your marriage when you get to a point where you realize that you've done the best you can do and
Yeah,
you're not going to try to diminish that.
yeah,
So, I mean, there have been times, Mark, people who know me, first of all, know I love to cook, but there have been times when I have been so exhausted
yeah,
that the kids get a deli sandwich or a PB&J with chips for dinner.
yeah.
And where I used to have mom guilt, someone who's been a mom longer than me said, but your kids ate.
Right,
She was like, there's some moms out here who can feed their kids and they're just negligent moms.
right.
They don't care if their kids get something to eat. They don't, she was like, she was like, how we know you're an excellent mom is that you're out here saying, guys, mom is exhausted,
Yeah,
dad's got work to do, so y'all just getting a sandwich and chips. She's like, and you're out here feeling guilty.
yeah,
She's like,
yeah.
because you're the mom that's like, oh, but I didn't make them chicken breast with,
Mm-hmm.
steamed broccoli and rice and, a homemade. She was like, Jen, relax.
Yeah,
They went to bed with
yeah,
full bellies.
yeah,
And she was like, 9 times out of 10, moms forget that your kids love you
yeah.
because they know you love them, not based on what they have for dinner.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's so good because when we go back to Jacob and Leah, that relationship is all based on performance and performance as the gateway or the conduit, the pathway to love.
Yep.
And, we have situations out there where some women are unable to have children
Yes.
and they feel less appreciated, less valuable because they can't do what they feel like most women can do.
Yeah.
And they try and perform, they try their hardest to perform, but maybe your love isn't rooted in that area of performance.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're loved without producing a child. And I think it brings home the point, Jen, to all these couples that we can never perform in every single area
Yeah.
and be the best in every single area. We're going to be deficient in some area that we want to perform well in. So, how do we feel loved in that area? Well, you just feel loved without having to perform. So, I think this is
Yep.
a great talk. We went a little bit long today,
Yeah.
but it's because there's so much
To
there. And I
unpack.
think
Yeah.
there's so many couples, so many marriages that are dealing with this on different
Oh,
levels.
yeah.
Um, Man, this is good. This is good. Well, y'all, this has been another episode of Breakfast with Mark and Jen. In case you didn't hear, we want to let you know that we just rolled out a 6-week course on marriage. It's called Cleave. And we
Yes.
want to help you live the marriage of your dreams,
Yep.
but live it together. Do it together. There's so much power. There are so many hidden gems packed in this course
Yeah.
that we believe in just 6 weeks, you can revolutionize your marriage and be on the path to success. And so we want you to go to cleaveco.com. It'll be
Yes.
linked in this video, and you can find out all you need to know about it. Go ahead and purchase that course. We made it a good price, right, Jen?
Absolutely.
Because we're out here trying to help couples,
Yes.
and we want you to be blessed by the content that God has given us.
For sure.
All right. So, listen, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And we will catch you next time. Until then, take care.